All right, 145. What is it, do you think? Said Julia. I don't think it's anything. I mean, I don't think it was ever put to any use. That's what I like about it. It's a little chunk of history that they've forgotten to alter. It's a message from 100 years ago, if one knew how to read it. And that picture over there, she nodded at the engraving top of 146 on the opposite wall. Okay, symbol engraving on the apartment wall. Would that be 100 years old? More, 200, I dare say. One can't tell. It's impossible to discover the age of anything nowadays. She went over to look at it. Here's where the brute stuck his nose out, she said, kicking the wainscoting immediately below the picture. What is this place? I've seen it before somewhere. It's a church, or at least it used to be. St. Clement's Dane, its name was. The fragment of rhyme that Mr. Charrington had taught him came back into his head, and he added half nostalgically, "Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's." To his astonishment, she capped the line. "You owe me 3 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. When will you pay me, say the bells of Old Bailey?" So if you're thinking you want, many of you are doing mini apartments for your dissertations. Grab a sticky note, 145, 146. I can't remember how it goes after that, but anyway, I remember it ends up, "Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head." It was like the two halves of a countersign, but there must be another line after the bells of Old Bailey. Perhaps it could be dug out of Mr. Charrington's memory if he were suitably prompted. "Who taught you that?" "My grandfather. He used to say it to me when I was a little girl. He was vaporized when I was 8. At any rate, he disappeared. I wonder what the lemon was," she added inconsequently. "I've seen oranges. They're a kind of round yellow fruit with a thick skin." "I can remember lemons. They were quite common in the 50s. They were so sour that it set your teeth on edge even to smell them." Top of 147. "I bet that picture's got bugs behind it. I'll take it down and give it a good cleaning someday. I suppose it's almost time we were leaving. I must start washing this paint off. What a bore. I'll get the lipstick off your face afterwards." Wednesday did not get up for a few minutes more. The room was darkening. He turned over toward the light and lay gazing into the glass paperweight. The inexhaustibly interesting thing was not the So paperweight was inexhaustibly interesting. Wow, that must be a really interesting symbol to be using that kind of language to describe it.
It's kind of funny that that's interesting to him because he works with a bunch of papers all the time. You would think he'd have something like that.
You would think a paperweight would be like on everyone's desk still. Like, what's so historically significant about a paperweight?
I mean, they're changing through the history so fast, they don't have things on their desk for long to sit and deal with.
Good point.
Gets the information, changes it, burns it, and sends the other thing away. He's circling through it real fast so he can't hold on to anything.
Holding on to stuff. Interesting thing was not the fragment of coral, but the interior of the glass itself. There was such a depth of it, and yet it was almost as transparent as air. It was as though the surface of glass had been the arch of the sky, enclosing a tiny world with its atmosphere complete. He had the feeling that he could get inside it, and that in fact he was inside it, along with the mahogany bed and the gate leg table and the clock on the steel engraving and the paperweight itself. The paperweight was the room he was in, and the coral was Julia's life, and his own, fixed in a sort of eternity at the heart of the crystal. Sticky notes right here. I know I don't want to lose this page. Didn't get a pen. Please help me so I can read faster. If I have to annotate it, it'll be slow and boring.
There's paper right there.
Green paper.
Oh. Yeah, I was right. This is...
You want to just get.
watermelon.
1:47:5. Sime had vanished. A morning came and he was missing from work. A few thoughtless people commented on his absence. On the next day, nobody mentioned him. On the third day, Winston went into this vestibule records department to look at the notice board. One of the notices carried a printed list of the members of the chess committee, of whom Sime had been one. It looked almost exactly as it had looked before. Nothing had been crossed out, but it was one name shorter. It was enough. Sime had ceased to exist. He had never existed. The weather was baking hot. In the labyrinthine ministry, the windowless, air-conditioned rooms kept their normal temperature, but outside the pavements scorched one's feet, and the stench of the tubes at the rush hours was a horror. The 1:48 preparations for Hate Week were in full swing, and the staffs of all the ministries were working overtime. Processions, meetings, military parades, lectures, waxwork displays, film shows, telescreen programs, all had to be organized. Stands had to be erected, effigies built, slogans coined, songs written, rumors circulated, photographs faked. What does all that remind you of? All the stuff that has to be done for Hate Week really reminds me of this. We gotta have a boogeyman. We gotta have fear and hate. We gotta have one party, others are enemy. We gotta have one religion, others are evil. We gotta have extreme nationalism. We have to hype the police and the military, and we have to have a cult of personality. Look at that. Please sticky note and mark this. Processions, meetings, military parades, lectures, waxwork displays, film shows, telescreen programs, organized, had to be erected, effigies built, slogans coined, songs written, rumors circulated, photographs faked. It's all there. Orwell told us all this.
It reminds me of, or it makes me think of like over-exaggerated nationalism, like, heck yeah, America!
Yeah.
Everything is red, white, and blue, brother. It reminds me of that.
And
so
if you
are 50 other countries' flags.
and if you criticize the patriotism, what are you?
A communist.
Or like
something
I
that.
don't want to wear the flag T-shirt on July 4th. And what makes me? What makes us? If I tell my mom, or my extreme whoever patriot, and I'm like, I don't want to wear that T-shirt on July 4th. I'm the enemy now.
Sounds like my birthday when I don't want to listen to Katy Perry's Fireworks.
Yeah, red, white, and blue doesn't look good with my complexion. Like, but no, it's not. Oh, it's rational. It's you're now the enemy. Julia's unit in the fiction department had been taken off the production of novels and was rushing out a series of atrocity pamphlets. Winston, in addition to his regular work, spent long periods every day in going through back files of the Times and altering and embellishing news items, which were to be quoted in speeches. Late at night, when crowds of rowdy proles roamed the streets, the town had a curiously febrile air. The rocket bombs crashed oftener than ever, and sometimes in the far distance there were enormous explosions which no one could explain, and about which there were wild rumors. The new tone, which was to be the theme song of Hate Week, the Hate Song it was called, had already been composed and being endlessly plugged on the telescreens. It had a savage, barking rhythm which could not exactly be called music, but resembled the beating of a drum, roared out by hundreds of voices to the tramp of marching feet. It was terrifying. The proles had taken a fancy to it, and in the midnight streets it competed with the still popular It Was Only a Hopeless Fancy. The parson's children played it at all hours of the night and day, unbearably, on the comb, on a piece of toilet paper. Winston's evenings were fuller than ever. Squads of volunteers organized by parsons were preparing the street for Hate Week, stitching banners, painting posters, erecting flagstaffs on the roofs, and perilously slinging wires across the street for the reception of streamers. Parsons boasted that Victory Mansion alone would display 400 meters of bunting. He was in his native element. Bunting is just like a flag. So we just had this conversation. He was in his native element and happy as a lark. The heat and the manual work had even given him a pretext, meaning for reverting to shorts and an open shirt in the evenings. He was everywhere at once, pushing, pulling, sawing, hammering, improvising, jollying everyone, along with comradely exhortations and giving out from every fold of his body what seemed an inexhaustible supply of acrid smelling sweat. Top of 149. A new poster had suddenly appeared all over London. It had no caption and represented simply the monstrous figure of a Eurasian soldier, 3 or 4 meters high, striding forward with expressionless Mongolian face and enormous boots, a submachine gun pointed from his hip. From whatever angle you looked at the poster, the muzzle of the gun, magnified by the foreshortening, seemed to be pointing straight at you. The thing had been plastered on every blank space, on every wall, even outnumbering the portraits of Big Brother. So here, people, let's say you need some decoration in your dissertation vignette. Look up Eurasian soldier submachine gun if you need yourself another poster. The proles, normally apathetic about the war, were being lashed into one of their periodical frenzies of patriotism. As though to harmonize with the general mood, the rocket bombs had been killing larger numbers of people than usual. One fell on a crowded film theater in Stepney, burying several hundred victims among the ruins. The whole population of the neighborhood turned out for a long, trailing funeral, which went on for hours and was, in effect, an indignation meeting. Another bomb fell on a piece of waste ground, which was used as a playground, and several dozen children were blown to pieces. There were further angry demonstrations. Goldstein was burned in effigy. You guys know what that means?
Yeah.
So, to protest you and your policies of teenagers get to go to school 6 hours a day for free, and to protest your ability to go get an education for free, I'm going to make a little puppet and make it look just like you. And I'm going to call it Kalen. And I'm then going to hang it from a stick. And I'm going to go parade around outside. I'm going to go down with Kalen, the symbol of all teenage horribleness. And then I might even burn the doll. And that would be burning the symbol in effigy.
Just the way that it was described, it really just made me think about God.
Yeah. Hundreds of copies of the poster of the Eurasian soldier were torn down and added to the flames, and a number of shops were looted in the turmoil. Then a rumor flew round that spies were directing the rocket bombs by means of wireless waves. And an old couple who were suspected of being foreign extraction had their house set on fire and perished of suffocation. So wireless waves, so that'd be like how soldiers use laser pointers to laze targets for smart bombs. In the room over Mr. Charrington's shop, when they could get there, Julia and Winston lay side by side on a stripped bed, top of 150, under the open window, naked for the sake of coolness. The rat had never come back, but the bugs had multiplied hideously in the heat. It didn't seem to matter. Dirty or clean, the room was paradise. As soon as they arrived, they would sprinkle everything with pepper bought in the black market, tear off their clothes and make love with sweating bodies, then fall asleep and wake to find the bugs had rallied and were massing for the counterattack. 4, 5, 6, 7 times they met during the month of June. Winston had dropped his habit of drinking gin at all hours. He seemed to have lost the need for it. He had grown fatter. His varicose ulcer had subsided, leaving only a brown stain on the skin above his ankle. His fits of coughing in the early morning had stopped. The process of life had ceased to be intolerable. He had no longer any impulse to make faces at the telescreen or shout curses at the top of his voice. Now that they had a secure hiding place, almost a home, it didn't even seem a hardship that they could only meet infrequently and for a couple hours at a time. What mattered was that the room over the junk shop should exist. to know that it was there, inviolate, was almost the same as being in it. The room was a world, a pocket of the past where extinct animals could walk. Mr. Charrington thought Winston was another extinct animal. He usually stopped to talk with Mr. Charrington for a few minutes on his way upstairs. The old man seemed seldom or never to go out of doors, and on the other hand, to have almost no customers. He led a ghost-like existence between the tiny dark shop and an even tinier back kitchen where he prepared his meals, and which contained, among other things, an unbelievably ancient gramophone with an enormous horn. He seemed glad of the opportunity to talk, wandering about among the worthless stock, with his long nose and thick spectacles, his bowed shoulders, his velvet jacket. He had always vaguely the air of being a collector rather than a tradesman. With a sort of faded enthusiasm, he would finger this scrap of rubbish or that, a china bottle stopper, the painted lid of a broken snuff box, a pinchbeck locket containing a stand of some long dead baby's hair. Gross.
What? No, that's a traditional Victorian thing, and it's cool.
When it's someone else's baby?
Yeah, I suppose.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
an oddity.
They're rattling off a bunch of symbols, but my idea was symbols, people, and you notice the yellow standard up here. We got to deal with them. Even though they're rattling off a bunch of symbols, and even though I want symbols for my box, dissertation vignettes, sorry. Do I want to just take one that doesn't mean anything to the characters? I mean, if this baby's hair comes up later and like Winston's really creeped out or something, then I might do the baby's hair. But if it's not going to impact the characters, I think I'm gonna let it go. Yes, Kale.
I don't know if it was just me, but the way that it switched from talking about like kids getting killed and stuff like that to talking about how Winston and Julie are so heavy makes me feel like they're low-key like kind of privileged. Like yes, their class of people is also suffering, but they're over here. It's like a couple taking a honeymoon to like a third world country and being like, oh, it's so
feels
happy
like,
and lonesome.
well, him talking about that and then being like, suddenly life isn't intolerable anymore. Yeah, for you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he stopped caring about, because his life has gotten better, he stopped caring about the other people. All of a sudden.
And they're in the place. They could be bombed just like the proles, and they're not thinking about it. They're not thinking about the proles, and they're not thinking about their safety.
They're not thinking about the guy lending them the apartment either. And his wife wanted kids, struggled to have kids, talking about dead baby's hair, a bunch of dead children.
Yeah.
And him being in a new relationship when he doesn't even know if his wife is dead or not.
I think they're kind of privileged. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. They're both party members. That's like an automatic. I feel.
Yeah. But this book really does, like, it makes a good example of how both are privileged in some ways. The proles get the freedom, but they're in danger. And then the party members don't have any freedom. But they have to work, and they don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they're safe.
But they're safe. Exactly.
They're pretty safe.
Yeah.
I mean, thought crime. You could get vaporized at any moment, but like.
Yeah, but physically,
Yes.
you're not gonna get likely blown to pieces
You're not
unless you're
gonna
messing around with proles.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Never
Your house
asked.
isn't gonna get set on fire. I think.
Dead baby's hair, never asking that Winston should buy it, merely that he should admire it. To talk to him was like listening to the tinkling of a worn-out musical box. He had dragged out from the corners of his memory some more fragments of forgotten rhymes. There was one about 24 blackbirds, and another about a cow with a crumpled horn, and another about the death of poor Cock Robin. It just occurred to me you might be interested, he would say with a deprecating little laugh whenever he produced a new fragment. But he could never recall more than a few lines of any one rhyme. both of them knew, in a way, it was never out of their minds that what was now happening could not last long. There were times when the fact of impending death seemed as palpable as the bed they lay on, and they would cling together with a sort of despairing sensuality, like a damned soul grasping at the last morsel of pleasure when the clock is within 5 minutes of striking. But there were also times when they had the illusion not only of safety, but of permanence. So long as they were actually in this room, they both felt no harm could come to them. Getting there was difficult and dangerous, but the room itself was sanctuary. It was as when Winston had gazed into the heart of the paperweight with the feeling that it would be possible to get inside that glassy world, and that once inside it, time could be arrested. Often they gave themselves up to daydreams of escape. Their luck would hold indefinitely, and they would carry on their intrigue just like this for the remainder of their natural lives. Or Catherine would die, and by subtle maneuverings, Winston and Julia would succeed in getting married. Feel like there's some background noise going on that's making it a little hard for me. So if you need me to stop so you can communicate, that's fine, but just tell me. Or they would commit suicide together.
Whoa.
Or they would disappear, alter themselves out. Sticky note, and you should be marking that part right there. 151, bottom.
Get married or kill yourself.
Yeah, it's,
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, those are
all those kids are dying, but we're having a great time in our little swanky hideout with the bed bugs. And then, oh, this glass, it's like we're inside the glass. Weird. And then get married or commit suicide.
And also, Julia is like an activist. She does care about the people suffering, and I just feel like Winston is just like wrapping her up in this, and they're both just getting lost in this fantasy.
Well, their relationship is so strange.
Yeah.
They don't know like anything about each other.
Or alter themselves out of top of 152. Recognition. Learn to speak with proletarian accents. Get jobs in a factory and live out their lives undetected in the back street. It was all nonsense, as they both knew. In reality, there was no escape. Even the one plan that was practical, suicide, they had no intention of carrying out. To hang on from day to day and from week to week, spinning out a present that had no future, seemed an unconquerable instinct, just as one's lungs will always draw the next breath so long as there is air available.
Whoa. Okay.
Fan your line.
Okay, we're not going to finish. So would you guys like a few minutes of wrapping up and finalizing your thoughts on your box?
I'm not done.
All my little